So let's talk about something huge today, something that's totally shaking up global trade. A massive Chinese island just closed its customs border. Yeah, I know. Sounds weird, right? Closed? But what if I told you that this move is actually one of the biggest opening up policies we've seen in a long, long time? Let's get into it.
So, let's set the scene. The date is December 18th, 2025, and the entire island of Hainan, yeah, the whole province, officially kicks off its customs closure. Now, your first thought is probably, closure? That sounds like building walls, going backward. And you're right, it does sound like that. But trust me, what's really happening is the total opposite.
But here's where it gets really interesting. This was supposed to be a monumental shift, right? So you'd expect a lot of buzz. But when people on the ground, foreign trade businesses, were asked about it, the reaction was kind of meh, a real shoulder shrug. A lot of them just called it a non-event. So what's the deal? Why go through all the trouble of building this massive free trade port if the very people it's supposed to attract don't seem to notice?
Okay, to figure this out, we have to get into the nitty-gritty of how this whole thing works, which brings us to our first big question. How on earth do you open a port by closing its borders?
All right, the key idea you got to wrap your head around is this phrase. Hainan is now inside China's territory, but outside the customs border. Think of it like this. For people, nothing's changed. You can still pop over with just your ID. But for stuff, for goods, for money, it's like a different country. It's playing by a whole new rule book compared to the rest of mainland China.
So, let's walk through this. It's basically a three-step process. First, you have what they call the first line. This is Hainan's border with the rest of the world. Goods from anywhere can come pouring in, and for the most part, there are no tariffs. Zero. Step 2, once those goods are inside Hainan, they're in a free-for-all zone. They can be moved around, stored, processed, anything goes. But then, and this is the important part, you have the second line. That's the border between Hainan and mainland China. If you want to move those goods into the mainland, that's when you've got to pay up the normal import taxes.
Okay, so now you can kind of see why your average Chinese business or shopper would be like, so what, right? If the goods still get hit with tariffs to reach them on the mainland, it doesn't really change their lives. Which brings us back to that big puzzle. Who is this whole setup really for? Who are the actual winners here? Look, the initial hype, the big myth, was that Hainan was going to be this massive duty-free shopping paradise for Chinese tourists. But that's not the real story, not even close. The reality is way more strategic. This isn't about shoppers. The real target audience here is foreign companies and international talent. The goal is to build a global business hub, not a giant mall.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. This isn't some wild theory. It's written right there in the analysis of the policy. The thinking is crystal clear, and I quote, "The main idea is not to help Chinese citizens go global, but to help foreign capital make money in China." Boom. It's not about Chinese companies expanding out. It's all about bringing foreign money in.
So you might be thinking, okay, so there's nothing in it for the locals? Well, not exactly. The opportunity just shifts. Instead of being the end customer, the new sweet spot is becoming a facilitator. The real money, the big new career path, is for the people who can be the connectors, the middlemen who link up those global supply chains with Chinese ones, right there on the island. All right, so if you're trying to attract all this foreign cash, you've got to have some serious perks, right? So what exactly is on offer? Let's dive into the new rules of the game.
Okay, if there's one number you need to remember from all of this, it's this one, 30%. Just burn that into your brain, 30%. It's an absolute game changer. This is what's called the 30% value add rule, and it is brilliant. Here's how it works. A foreign product comes into Hainan, totally tariff-free. Then a company on the island processes it, adds at least 30% more value to it, and poof, it gets a brand new identity. It's not a foreign product anymore. It's now officially made in Hainan. And with that shiny new passport, it can waltz right into mainland China with zero tariffs. You can see why this is a massive, massive carrot for foreign companies to set up shop there. Next up is something called freedoms of the air, and this is a big one. So most major cities in China, like Beijing or Shanghai, have what's called the fifth freedom. But Hainan, it's been given the seventh freedom. That's the highest level there is in the entire country. So what the heck does that even mean? It means a foreign airline, let's say one from Kazakhstan, can fly a route that doesn't even touch Kazakhstan. They could fly passengers and cargo directly from Hainan to, say, Prague. This turns Hainan into a logistics superpower, basically putting it in the same league as Singapore or Dubai.
And they're not stopping there. The list of perks goes on.
You've got a crazy low 15% income tax for both companies and skilled people who move there. They're also saying, hey, you want to move your factory here? Go ahead. They've waived import licenses on most used industrial equipment. And get this, foreign companies can have 100% ownership of data centers and can move their money in and out of the country freely. You add all that up, and it's a pretty irresistible offer.
Okay, I know what you're thinking. China already has Hong Kong, it has Shanghai. These are massive global hubs. Why not just beef up one of those? Why go through all the hassle of starting from scratch on a tropical island? Well, that brings us to the really clever part, the idea of Hainan as a grand experiment, a giant sandbox.
When you look at the options, it all starts to make sense. Hong Kong is like iOS. It's a polished, finished product, but its whole system, its laws, its finances, it's just not compatible with the mainland system, which is more like Android. Plus, it's politically complicated. Then you have Shanghai. That's the economic engine of the whole country. It's just too big, too important. You can't risk breaking it with some radical experiment. But Hainan? It's an island, physically separate. Its economy is smaller. It's a blank slate, the perfect little sandbox where you can try out wild new ideas in a controlled way.
So you see, Hainan is way more than just another free trade zone. You can think of it as a miniature version of China, but with all these special features built in. It's a lab. It's a place to cook up new rules for a world that's getting more and more complicated. We're in this era of what people are calling fragmented globalization, right? The old playbook, the old rules that everyone followed, they're kind of breaking down. Hainan is where China is testing out a new playbook.
And believe me, the ripples from this experiment are going to be felt way beyond just China. Which leads us to our final big picture look. How is this one island going to reshape the entire continent of Asia? You can really break down the impact into 3 huge levels. Level 1, it's coming for Singapore's crown as the king of shipping in the region. Level 2, it could become something like a shared factory floor for the whole continent. And Level 3, this is the long-term strategic play. It could finally solve what's known as the Malacca dilemma, China's big vulnerability of having most of its ships squeezed through that one narrow strait.
Here's a perfect little story to show you how this works in the real world. You've got Indonesia, right? They produce a ton of palm oil, but they're getting hit with export restrictions from places like the EU. So, what's the clever workaround? They ship their raw palm oil to Hainan. It gets processed there, easily hits that magic 30% value add number, and suddenly it's no longer made in Indonesia, it's made in Hainan. And just like that, it can be shipped off to Europe, no problem. Think about that. Made in China is literally becoming a protective shield for other countries' industries.
Now let's zoom out even further and look at the long game. For centuries, literally since 1677, Thailand has dreamed of digging a canal to bypass the crazy congested Strait of Malacca. It never happened. But now, there's a new plan, a land bridge, basically a rail and road corridor planned for around 2030. Now imagine this. You combine that land bridge with the new super hub in Hainan. All of a sudden, you have a brand new, powerful trade route that completely redraws the logistics map of Asia. You're no longer dependent on that one single, vulnerable choke point.
So when you put it all together, the sandbox experiment, these new rules of trade, the redrawing of ancient trade routes, it's clear this is more than just another economic project. This is a massive strategic play. It makes you wonder, right? For decades, China got really good at playing the game of globalization by the rules that were already there. The question now is, are they done just playing the game? Are they building a whole new game board instead?